Okay, we're here in our cold and dark 737. The first step in successfully starting is to turn on the battery. As you can see, we just did that. The next step is to turn on the APU, and in order to do that, we need to flip on the leftmost fuel pump in order to get gasoline going to the APU, and you'll see that we have a draw on the battery now, meaning that in order for the APU to start, it's taking power from the battery. Switching back to our cockpit view, you can see with a few warning lights on. We just want to go ahead and turn them off so they won't bother us. While the APU is starting, we're just going to go into our FMC, flight management computer, and look around. As you can see, this is the initial information for our flight, but the IRS systems are not aligned. In order to do that, we're going to need to input our reference starting airport. And sometimes FSX actually has the gate, but I guess this time it does not. So it's not really that important. And so as you can see, the pressure in the APU is good, and the buses have just lit up, meaning we can transfer power to the APU. We're now going to turn our emergency power, turn on our strobe lights and signaling lights. Again, turning off our caution in the main cockpit. We're going to align our IRS by switching the two left and right knobs to align, waiting for the FMC to reciprocate the function. In a second, we'll see a line of empty boxes showing that we can input our current location, and there it is. It doesn't matter which one you choose. I like to choose the airport location. It really doesn't matter. Now we're going to switch the two knobs to nav, and in a second you'll see the FMC take it, and we'll be set. Continuing, we're going to go to the route page and enter SFO as our starting airport and LAX as our destination. For this flight, we're just going to call sign our airplane PMDG 001. And in order to find the runway, normally just use the in-game ATC to tell me. Knowing SFO, probably 28L. We'll see what they tell us. Yeah, so we're just going to input that in for the runway section. So you can see on our navigation display, 28L is now front and center. Going back to the overhead panel, we're just going to make sure that our engine bleeds are off, and that we're turning both air conditioning packs on, as well as the reciprocating fans to get air to the cockpit and cabin. And going further up along the overhead panel, we're going to turn on the pitot-static tube heating and window heating. And to do some more with the FMC, you can see this is our route page that we would normally use to put in airways and other nav points. But for now, we're just going to do our initial setup. You can just right-click on the keys to have FSX actually give you values. So we're actually going to fly at 27,000 feet. It's a little bit below our trip altitude. And we're going to execute. So we're putting this into the computer so our plane knows the altitude to climb to. Now, whenever you set an altitude, you have to go to our pressurization system and actually bring that up to the altitude that we're going to fly at, which in this case is 27,000 feet. Continuing to N1 limits, here you have many different options. We're going to stay with the default, but basically you can lower your takeoff thrust to reduce engine wear. by selecting lower thrust values, but since we're flying full, I just want to stick with the maximum thrust for takeoff. Continuing to our V-speeds, we're going to input the wind and direction. And just by clicking Shift-Z, you can have Microsoft Flight Simulator tell you the wind on the ground and the direction it's going, making everything very simple. We also know that our runway pitch is 0, so it's not an incline. After putting all these values in, we will be set to confirm our V-speeds. And we should be ready to select our departure. And you can basically look these up on FlightAware, but I know that we'll be departing port 4 SID with an AB transition. And now we're just going to go ahead and confirm that. And our arrival into Los Angeles is going to be a SAD 6. Star with an AB transition. So again, it's the same transition. It's a short flight, making everything really simple. As you can see, this magenta line depicts the route we're going to take. Now, we can change the mode of our display into path and actually step through our flight. Everything looks normal, the magenta line is continuing. Approaching the airport, and we have a flight discontinuity. In order to delete that, we just bring the waypoint after the discontinuity up to the discontinuity and execute it. The blue dotted line you saw a little earlier was the missed approach, and hopefully we won't need to use that. So now that our nav points are set, we can close the FMC, and a good rule of thumb is to set your MCP to your cruising altitude right away, and set your heading to your runway heading, and in this case it is 27,000 feet and a heading of 280. Going back up to our overhead panel, we're going to do a quick scan before pushback and engine start. Everything is looking good. We're going to turn on all of our fuel pumps and all of our hydraulic and electric pressure systems, and we should be good for pushback. Now, PMDG actually has a pushback system built into the FMC, so why not use it? We're going to remove our wheel chocks, and you can see there are a bunch of other options that you can use on the ground. We don't need them right now. Going back to pushback, you can see there are a bunch of options: which way to turn, the degree of the turn. We're actually going to turn on progressive taxi just so we know where we need to go. It looks like along the line our nose needs to go right. And I've always had a problem, but I can never get the PMDG pushback to actually turn 90 degrees, so I put 89. And normally I change the straightaway distance to 100 instead of the default because I go off the runways sometimes with their value, or taxiway, sorry. So as you can see, the jetway is going back, and will be set to push back momentarily.
And ground cockpit. All right, Captain. We're all set.
As you can see, we're now pushing back from gate B25. Let's fast forward a little bit to when the push completes.
Push is complete, set record. Roger that.
As you can see, during the pushback, I started the number 1 engine. Let me walk you through the second. So we're only doing one at a time. That click was the ignition turning off. We're now going to put that on continuous. And we're going to flip number 2, ignition 2 on ground, and we're going to look at the N2 until that increases to above a value of 20. And it looks like the push went a little awry there. You can see the engine spool up, and it's above 20, so now we're going to turn on the fuel and wait for the N1, which is the big fan that everyone sees in front. Turn on. Oh, and that indication on top is apparently Rex, Real Environments Extreme, decided to tune in and upload weather. So we're waiting for the engine to settle at idle, and there it is. And again, like engine number 1, we're going to go turn the ignition to ground, to continuous, sorry. And we also need to turn on our yaw damper and turn on our indicators, position indicators to steady and strobe, as well as turning on taxi lights, runway turnoff lights, and wheel well lights. And we've now turned our buses to engine and away from the APU. We're turning the bleeds on the air unit to both engines, turning on our both packs, putting the isolation valve to auto, and turning on reciprocating fans. We're now ready to turn our APU off. And we're now running on full engine power. Back in the main cockpit, everything's good. We should be ready for taxiing momentarily. On that lower center display, you can see I'm testing the aileron motion, and you can actually see the hydraulic pressure change, now elevators, and rudder, as you can see, as that dial moves from left to right. We're going to lower our flaps to our predetermined 5 degrees, and that's the upper overhead panel. We see that popped up. Flaps and slats should both show up there, and everything looks good. Looking over here, let's zoom in a little bit. This is actually our TCAS system. We want to turn it to TARA. So basically our transponder is on, and we are ready to take off, or taxi rather. Turning our seatbelt lights on, making sure our chime is operational. And now we're all set for taxi. Thanks for watching, everyone.